Royal Society for Encouragement of Arts, Manufacturing, and Commerce, the circular economy. You have here your initial product, and here you have your consumers and users, and then you have basically a loop for design for longevity. Here, this is the first loop. Around, we have the design, you know, the different stakeholders around here, investors, policymakers, resource management, and so on and so forth. So the second loop is whenever you use the design for services, and that includes the design of brands and companies in this loop, right? Very interesting. And then you have a third loop where you start to design for reuse in manufacturing. For reuse in manufacturing, which includes the manufacturers and so on and so forth. And then the other one includes the resource management, which is really the design for materials recovered. So how much of your process is actually starting to be designed to use all recycled material or to recycle the products that you actually sell? Not many, not many. So these are the conclusions, just to open the mouth. Obviously, a few conclusions that we will discuss in the panel. In manufacturing, nothing is secret. Will you agree? What the challenges are is really to create strong brands and logistics and the capacity for collaboration at a global scale, including places where we feel very uncomfortable because of our cultural distance. The big new manufacturing skills are branding, logistics, collaboration at a global scale, and adoption and adaptation of new technologies, and obviously, as we have seen lately, the attraction, retention, and development of specialized labor. So apparently, the business of manufacturing is not necessarily transforming raw materials into final products. That's easy. That's the easy part. The tough part is what happens before and after, but especially after the product is outside the warehouse. So I hope that this brings a good introduction to the panel. And should we introduce the panel? Okay. Thank you very much.
You carried us through a number of challenges as well as a number of solutions, and I think that you also gave us great insight into the future, into 2050 and beyond, which is, I think, far more than a lot of us would have been thinking of. I ask you to take your seat as moderator of our panel discussion. However, before I invite the other members of the panel to join us on stage, let me point out to you that we have mics, so that if you have questions during the panel discussion, feel free to raise your hand and the microphones will be brought to you. Okay? On today's panel, the first one that I would like to introduce would be Mr. Paul Hihang. And Mr. Paul Hihang graduated from University of Leeds with the BSc in Operational Research in Computing. He began his professional career in information technology, but joined the supply chain field in 1992. And has gained a wealth of experience in manufacturing and distribution of home, personal care, pharmaceuticals, foods, and agri-vet items within the fast-moving consumer goods category. Mr. Hihang is currently employed as the Supply Chain Director of Grand Bay Paper Products Limited and Trinidad Tissues Limited, the leading paper converter in the Caribbean. He is charged with making GBP and TTL the best supply chain in the Caribbean and Central America. He is also currently the chairman of the Family Planning Association of Trinidad and Tobago, having served as a board member since 1992. And this is very important to Mr. Hihang. He is an avid fitness and music enthusiast and is the proud father of 2 girls. Mr. Hihang, please join us on stage. Please welcome him. The second person on stage will be Mr. John De Silva. Mr. De Silva has over 20 years' experience in supply chain, operations, general management, and finance, having spent the last 19 years with Nestle, living in, now this is a list, Trinidad, Jamaica, Switzerland, the Dominican Republic, and Mexico. Most recently, he served as Nestle's professional head of supply chain and operations for Latin America. Currently, he is the founding partner and director of, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it ACCEL, or is it pronounced Axel? Solutions International Incorporated, a firm based in the Dominican Republic that provides clients with international market access capabilities, supply chain consultancy, and outsourcing solutions. He speaks both French and Spanish. Please join me in welcoming trilingual Mr. De Silva to the stage.
Very welcome.
And finally on the panel, we have Mr. Roger Roach, who is the Managing Director of Answer Coatings Limited, a member of the Answer McCall Group of Companies. He is the former CEO of Langston Roach Industries, one of the largest manufacturers and distributors of cleaning products, personal care products, and janitorial supplies in the Caribbean. He is the holder of a BSc degree in Economics and Management, as well as a postgraduate diploma in Corporate and Commercial Law from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill. And most importantly to me, he is also a graduate. He holds an MBA from the Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business. He is also a director of the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, and I'd like you all to welcome Mr. Roger Roach on stage.
Well, thank you very much for being here today. Please, all the audience, get prepared for some questions for our experts. I told them before the session that I apologize because I'm not at all an expert like them in manufacturing, so my apologies. But I would like if each one of you, starting with you, Roger, you can make some sort of what are your initial thoughts about the challenges of the manufacturing sector currently in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, thank you for the question. That's a pretty general question. I think that Professor Curlew covered some of it in his first slide, but I'd just like to repeat a couple of the challenges that I see in the manufacturing sector. He touched on the supply of labor, and I would go further to say the supply of relevant skilled labor that is available to manufacturers. The second one is the most recent one is the access to an adequate supply of foreign exchange, so that manufacturers can pay suppliers for goods needed on time and at a price that wouldn't cause cost increases to our product offering. The other challenge we have is with respect to incentives available to manufacturers in the society, and I would use the commercial banks or government incentives that has to do with making cost of capital, lowering the cost of capital that's available for things like automation and retooling and things of that nature. And the final challenge, I would think, is because the country is so dependent on the energy sector, I think that a lot of talk has happened around diversifying the economy, but not enough policy and strategy that will propel the economic engine to diversify. And the last one I would like to touch on is with regards to the topic that we're here for today, which is the supply chain. A lot of the additives and the inputs into manufacturing are not available in Trinidad and Tobago. And therein lies the supply chain challenge. And therefore, to manufacture a lot of the goods that are sold in Trinidad and Tobago, we have to access raw materials from sometimes far ends of the earth to ensure that we're competitive even in Trinidad and Tobago. And even though a lot of our products are sold in Trinidad and Tobago, we actually compete against the world on our shelves, in our supermarkets, in our hardwares, and even with the technological products that we sell. And I think that this topic is relevant, and hopefully at the end of the discussion, our experts to my right, your left, can shed some light on how we can improve the supply chain in our country. So I will just stop there for now.
There you go. Thank you very much. John?
Sure. Just building on what Roger has said, I think he gave a very good landscape an overview of the external conditions that impact the environment that the manufacturers are operating within. I think specifically two challenges that manufacturers are facing right now in Trinidad. First and foremost, as import duties lower, and there's going to be an increasing amount of competitors entering basically your home market. And we know what that means in terms of the competitive intensity, the impact that losing or potentially having at risk your bread and butter. That's one very, very, I think, critical challenge that has to be addressed. And the second thing is you can address that through different competitive actions that you can take. Primarily, a lot of the emphasis had been in the past based on cost optimization and looking for efficiency. But you cannot save yourself to prosperity. Which brings me to the second point. The second challenge is how do we grow? And the fact is, with a population of 1.2 million, 1.3 million, you simply do not have economies of scale at home that will justify the type of investment that you need to make to deliver the cutting-edge technology. So the only way you can do that is to really look at expanding your business beyond the boundaries of Trinidad and Tobago. That, for me, those are the two key challenges. Protecting my home market while I generate enough value to invest in my expansion overseas. And those are the two things that I really see us facing.
Go ahead, Paul.
Morning, everyone. Building upon what my colleagues have said to the left, the Manufacturers Association has been quite forthright in asking the fact that we live on an island, or two islands, where importing and exporting is a little too difficult, actually plenty difficult, for what we want to achieve. Taking advantage of our low energy rates requires that, as you have earlier said, the importation of things that you wish to convert and add value to. Doing business in Trinidad is very, very difficult, even compared to other CARICOM islands. And that, for me, is a real bugbear to hear that Jamaica and Barbados, you could do things and set up things in half the time that you could do in Trinidad and Tobago. That's a real issue and booming factor that I have, because we are considered the giants of manufacturing at this point. We can't leave out the fact about the scale, because to do that scale and to dominate just in this immediate set of islands is one thing. You want to go beyond that and ensure that you could get into the huge markets that are just to the south and to the west of us. And for me, I would say getting into those South American and Latin American markets, we need to make more efforts. And that starts with a whole host of things, primarily the language. Spanish should have been a second language in Trinidad since 1980-something. It shouldn't be something that we're talking about now. That, access to those places, which a few companies have been successful in, shouldn't be an issue. And those are the kind of fundamental things that I think, which go beyond the supply chain, I see as major, major challenges that we have to cope with.
But is it really the language? Or is it something else?
No, I mean, that's a starting point. I mean, remember you asked me earlier in Spanish if I speak Spanish, and I said, okay.
Well, yeah, but let me give you an example. You have this very interesting company in Barbados, Goddard Enterprises, which
Yes.
we all know. If you take a look at Goddard, you will see that at their board, no one speaks Spanish, not even a person actually is Latin. If you take a look at their top management team, maybe only one speaks Spanish. However, of the about 4,000 people that they have, more than half come from different countries like Colombia, Mexico, Guatemala, Ecuador, Chile, in their catering service.
Right.
So, is it really a language?
Well, the desire, the vision, you wish to go to those markets and do what you have to do to explore. And as John was saying, to make sure that your product is differentiated, that you could offer a service competitively. So Goddard has to be commended for that. But notwithstanding the fact that their board may have a limit in terms of that language, the competence is there, which is what Roger was focusing on before. They know how to execute in those markets.
So Roger, when are we going to take your company to Latin America?
Well,
Is that too much of a direct question?
no.
Am I making you? Because I'm going to, I mean, we have obviously some guidelines, but I'm just not asking any of the questions that I prepared.
Okay. So I will just build on what Paul was saying. I think really is lack of will to go into the market. I think it's lack of will. Because if I were born in China and I were running a large manufacturing company in China, I would see the world as my market. It doesn't matter what language the indigenous country or the targeted country is speaking. There are consumers there. They use my products. I can translate the label or the packaging, as you mentioned, in any language. I understand the market conditions. I understand the multi-local strategy. A lot of companies, we call them multinationals, but they're really multi-locals because they have an origin, but they really try to execute strategy to suit the country in which they're trying to target. So I really think it's a lack of will more than anything else. In terms of my own business, we sell coatings products. We manufacture the famous Penta and Sissons brands. And I work with Hanson McCall, and that's a fortunate position to be in because we are able to buy our way into markets. So we have a team, and what they do is really, can we manufacture here and export into those markets? Or do we look for a company in that market that already has a stronghold, a foothold, that has synergies with our business, whether we are the supplier, or whether we are the financer, or whether we are the acquirer, or whether we can merge with them, which is what you spoke about earlier, to create a new entity or to improve on an existing entity that can service a new market. So we are looking at targets in Latin America right now, and I'm sure in the near future you're going to hear more about that.
Thank you. John, you've been operating in many other markets. I know you told me I just came back from Mexico. Yeah? I heard that's very beautiful there. From your perspective, because you're kind of an insider, outsider, is there something else beyond will that impede the local entrepreneurs to dare to conquer Latin America, to export in general?
What I've seen, I mean, just in the short time that I've really been back, and of course, I mean, living the first half of my life really here, I think that, and we have to be honest, manufacturers in Trinidad have been very successful. I've had the opportunity to live in other parts of the Caribbean. And manufacturers in Trinidad have been extremely, extremely successful. And probably we got to the point where that success may have led to some complacency. There were certain protectionist measures in place. Those have been eroded, and I think the rate of competition entering the market has been much faster than the rate at which we're able to tackle the market. So I believe that complacency as a result of success may have, diminished the hunger or the will to actively seek export markets. I think what we've seen in the last couple of years, I think that is not as much as an issue as we've seen in the past. We have tremendous brands here, and we know about the Trinidadian great brands. You have Angostura, you have Holiday Snacks, you have Bermudas, you have Charles, you have tremendous Trinidad-based brands which are present. And it's nice to walk into Santo Domingo and to see a Chubby, right, in a Nacional supermarket. And so I think the current generation of captains of industry have recognized that we need to expand. I think what we need to do next is really to look at from the outside in. Rather than the perspective, I have a great product, how am I going to sell it? We need to start looking at, how some of the larger companies are doing it. What market do I want to enter, and what does the consumer want? And am I in a position to satisfy that need? It's very, very different, starting with, I have something to sell, let me go sell it. Because if you have that approach, then, differences in culture and language can be, quite intimidating. But if you start with, I'm going in with my hands empty and my eyes open and listen to what consumers have to say, then that helps define what product you will create, and that gives you a certain confidence that I have defined this product with a specific consumer in mind. and I talk specifically about consumer as opposed to customers, because we've focused a lot on customers, because the customer is the guy that buys from us, right? And that's how I can keep my plant running, 3 shifts, 7 days a week. But reality, we know that value is created when your customer's customer buys and consumes your product. And that's when you know you're onto winning business strategy. So I think starting with what the consumer wants in Colombia or Mexico, then that really is what I think we need to start to address. So perhaps maybe the success of the past may have hindered some of that, but now we have a burning platform and we need to I think, to take this approach.
Interesting. So it's success. It's I've heard a beautiful phrase by Gary Hamel. He said that within the fruit of success lies the seed of failure, which is quite interesting. Paul, we have been hearing that we have labor shortages all around the place, and it is something that everybody is complaining about. But what do you think? At what extent these labor shortages are really a reflection of the lack of automation or investment in technology in manufacturing, or in services? To what extent is that?
That's a double-barrel question in my mind. You have to look at the origins of manufacturing in Trinidad and how it was set up in the 60s. It was actually set up to create employment. And some of the multinationals that came in, like the Nestle's and the Unilevers, and so were asked to set up plants here with the intention of absorbing people to work. So there was I would say, maybe a better choice of word, that they didn't look at automation as the first step to doing things as efficiently as they would do in the other markets in which they operated or countries in which they operated. Given what has happened over the last 5 to 10 years in Trinidad with the make work programs and so on, labor is now at a premium, as you have presented, and also very difficult to get, as Roger had pointed out, I think quite correctly, the right competence and skills of what you need at the correct level. And it's amazing that, every day you see in the papers how many jobs are required at the base level as opposed to the senior level. It really speaks volumes to where we're at. The automation part, surely in our company is a very big and important step of helping with that. Because as I was sharing with other people yesterday when we were talking about this seminar, I could run a warehouse with one person. Right? I could have radio frequency sensors, as you said. I could have forklifts do whatever they have to do, and rack and do anything that I want to do, just with the push of a button. To do that requires a significant amount of investment, not necessarily readily available to companies on certain scales in Trinidad and Tobago. So that's one aspect. And then the next side would be, we don't have a history of maintaining and doing preventative maintenance. It's always like an afterthought. So you need to ensure that those aspects, if you're going into the automation, you have that availability of management skill on the engineering side to be prepared to invest and do those things properly. Have your spares available and those types of things on different parts of the machinery to ensure that they can run 24/7. And that in itself is a different supply chain that needs to be properly managed. So you need to find a balance in my mind based on your capital structure, based on where you want to go. I curse certain days when I get in the office and I say, I don't want to see a human. And then I look in my mirror and I say, okay, maybe not. But, you have to understand that that's what you're dealt with, and you have to find a way to deal, to play with it. Because the machines do fail as well. We are a highly automated plant. And we have our challenges daily to make sure that we run at the proper throughputs that we need to. So, for me, it's a balance with all those different aspects that you have to look at.
Excellent. I want to move into another topic, and then we will open the questions to the audience. But I know what would be your approach, Roger, to this. Do you think that low energy prices have been really an advantage or a disadvantage for the competitiveness of the manufacturing sector in the long term?
When I got the list of questions, I thought that was the most interesting question. So let me just bring it home. On, in the last two businesses that I led, we always prospered more when the energy prices were lower, or when the economy was not in a boom situation. So let me explain why. Because the current business I'm in, we sell coatings products, and a lot of the raw materials that go into coatings are petrochemical byproducts. And therefore, we have seen a decrease in our cost of raw materials as a result of the decrease in energy prices. When the prices is high, those same raw materials increase with the energy price. So we're always looking at the energy price to see how we hedge our cost of inputs, or what we state the standard cost at, to be able to price the products effectively. So I would say that now it's a benefit, because we are seeing a lower cost of raw materials. But because most of our products are still sold in Trinidad and Tobago, and the economy is essentially a government